Penny will certainly be surprised when she sees this. Wowzers, it's the top-secret Gadget phone.
There was a time in the early 1980s when Saturday mornings meant one thing: cartoons. And if you were a kid in 1983, chances are you remember rushing to the TV set to watch a bumbling bionic detective stumble his way through one impossible mission after another. The show was everywhere. The theme song was inescapable. And for a few years, it genuinely felt like nothing could stop it. But something did. Today we're going back to look at Inspector Gadget, 1983. How the 80s cartoon favorite fell apart. Part 1. Where it all began. To understand how Inspector Gadget eventually fell apart,
Those are great, Gadget, but the crime computer does things you can't.
Like what, Chief?
you first have to understand just how unlikely it was that the show succeeded at all. The series was co-created by Andy Hayward, Jean Chalopin, and French animator Bruno Bianchi. It was the first American production from DIC Entertainment, a studio that had started in Paris in 1971 under Jean Chalopin and had only recently opened its American offices in Burbank, California in April 1982. Inspector Gadget was essentially their bet on breaking into the North American market, and the pressure to get it right was enormous. The concept itself was a clever one. Take the bumbling incompetence of Inspector Clouseau from the Pink Panther films.
Get on with the cooking.
That's strange.
Penny, you'd better reactivate the security system now.
Give him bionic gadgets in the spirit of the $6 Million Man, wrap it in the comedy stylings of Get Smart, and aim the whole thing squarely at children. The result was Inspector Gadget, a cyborg detective from Metro City who was loaded with every kind of mechanical gizmo imaginable, and yet somehow managed to be almost completely useless at his own job. His niece Penny and her dog Brain did virtually all the real detective work, while Gadget blundered into the right place at the right time and took the credit. It was a genuinely funny premise. Kids got the slapstick, adults could appreciate the parody, and the villains, Dr. Claw and his criminal organization, MAD, gave the show just enough menace to keep things interesting without ever becoming truly scary. The show debuted with a pilot episode on December 4th, 1982.
Who can play at that game?
And then officially premiered on September 12th, 1983. From almost the first week, it performed remarkably well in syndication. By December 1984, an industry advertisement from LBS Communications revealed that Inspector Gadget had risen from the 26th to the 4th most watched syndicated kids program in the space of just 1 year, a jump of 156% in ratings. By May 1985, the show was airing on 112 stations across the country, reaching 85% of American households. Those are not small numbers. Part 2, the pilot and the casting chaos. Before the show even properly launched, the road to getting it on air was more complicated than most people realize.
Eating with chopsticks is a fine art, Penny. The secret is in the hand position.
The pilot episode, titled Winter Olympics, sometimes referred to as Gadget in Winterland, went through a genuinely unusual casting process. The first actor hired to voice Inspector Gadget was Gary Owens, who gave the character a deep British-sounding delivery. That didn't sit right with producers. They then brought in Jesse White, whose voice was closer to what they were looking for, but still wasn't quite there. Eventually, someone made the obvious connection. If the show was drawing so heavily from Get Smart, why not hire Don Adams himself, the man who played Maxwell Smart? Adams was brought in to re-record the pilot's dialogue entirely, and once you heard him in the role, it was impossible to imagine anyone else.
This message will self-destruct. Right, Chief? You can count on me, even without the rays.
That sharp, self-assured delivery, oblivious to everything going wrong around him, was the perfect fit for a character who believed himself to be the finest detective alive while routinely exploding things, falling down stairs, and deploying the wrong gadget at the worst possible moment. The casting of Dr. Claw followed a similarly winding path. Frank Welker was originally cast in the role, but producers then swapped him out for Don Franks, who voiced the villain for approximately the first 25 episodes. Eventually, they decided Welker's version was stronger after all and returned him to the role, though several episodes featuring Franks' performance remained in the final cut because Welker was unable to redub them all. There was also a threatened lawsuit early on.
You should mind your manners. It's not polite to push people.
After the pilot aired, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer contacted DIC to express concern that Inspector Gadget was too similar to their character Inspector Clouseau. In response, DIC made a visible alteration. The mustache that Gadget wore in the pilot was quietly removed for the rest of the series. Interestingly, it was Don Franks who inadvertently helped cast one of the show's most beloved characters. During production, Franks asked the producers if his daughter could audition for the role of Penny. They agreed, and Cree Summer walked in and got the part. It would become the very first role of what would turn into one of the most prolific voice acting careers in animation history. Part 3, the animation and the music that made it special. One of the things that genuinely set the first season of Inspector Gadget apart from much of what else was on television at the time.
Hey, it sounds like one of those flies. Go, Gadget, swatter!
Was the quality of its animation. DIC had partnered with Tokyo Movie Shinsha, known today as TMS Entertainment, to handle the majority of the animation for Season 1. TMS was a Japanese studio with considerable experience and a level of craft that showed up clearly on screen. Additional work was handled by Cuckoo's Nest Studio in Taiwan. The pilot episode itself was animated by Telecom Animation Film, a subsidiary of TMS, on a slightly higher budget than the standard episodes. For viewers watching at the time, there was a visible polish to the show that wasn't common in American television animation of the early 1980s. Characters moved fluidly, backgrounds had detail, and the action sequences had energy.
What's on those other 2 islands? Any factories? It's another one of those flies.
It wasn't theatrical quality animation, but for a syndicated television cartoon, it was noticeably good. The music was equally distinctive. The theme song was composed by Shuki Levy, whose longtime business partner, Haim Sabin, co-produced the score. Levy drew inspiration from Edvard Grieg's classical piece In the Hall of the Mountain King, weaving that urgent, propulsive energy into something entirely new. The result was one of the most immediately recognizable theme songs in all of animated television. Even today, most people who grew up in the 1980s can hum it within 2 notes. Levy also developed a full library of musical cues for the series. Themes for each character, chase sequences, mystery scenes.
You know, wet areas around swimming pools can be very dangerous. You should really watch your step.
And much of it was built around variations of the main Gadget melody. The music gave the show a coherent, lively sound that reinforced the playful tone of every episode. Inspector Gadget was also, notably, the first animated television series to be broadcast in stereo sound, a technical distinction that placed it ahead of almost everything else in its category at the time. Part 4, the machine behind the show and its cracks. Dick Entertainment was riding high on the success of Inspector Gadget, and the studio moved fast to capitalize on it. By 1984 and 1985, DIC had shows filling time slots on all 3 major networks, as well as the syndication market. Inspector Gadget itself had been licensed across 55 countries and was broadcast in 24 different languages.
Well, they certainly don't have electricity. Go, Gadget, flashlight!
But behind the scenes, the company had a reputation that the public didn't fully see. Within the industry, DIC was known for cutting corners wherever possible. The studio had an adversarial relationship with animation unions, and a unionization effort in 1984 had failed. People in the business began using DIC as shorthand for Do It Cheap, a nickname that stuck throughout the company's history. This wasn't entirely hidden from viewers. Anyone who watched closely could see signs of budget strain in certain episodes. Repeated background elements, simplified character movements, reused animation cycles. In a 65-episode first season produced at speed, not every installment could receive equal attention.
Strictly for the birds. It's time to throw in the sponge.
The sheer volume of content DIC was churning out made some degree of inconsistency almost inevitable. Still, for the most part, the first season held together. The writing was reasonably sharp, the characters were consistent, and the formula, Gadget bumbles, Penny saves the day, Dr. Claw vows revenge, worked reliably week after week. There was a rhythm to it that audiences trusted. Part 5. The second season and where things went wrong. After the 65-episode first season concluded in late 1983, the show went into a period of repeats for over a year. When a second season was ordered, it returned in the fall of 1985 with 21 new episodes, a notably smaller run than the first, and the differences were immediately apparent to anyone paying attention.
Those dangerous tricks unless we know what we're doing. Okay, I'll think of my own magic.
The most significant change happened before a single frame was animated. When DIC moved production for Season 2 from Nelvana's Canadian studios to their own Los Angeles headquarters, the entire voice cast, with the exception of Don Adams, was replaced. Cree Summer, who had been the voice of Penny since the beginning, was out. Dan Hennessy, who had voiced Chief Quimby throughout Season 1, was also gone. Holly Berger stepped in as the new Penny, and Maurice LaMarche took over as Chief Quimby. The rationale was straightforward and cost-driven. Recording in Los Angeles with local talent was cheaper than flying Canadian actors down or maintaining the Canadian production arrangement. For longtime viewers, the change was noticeable. Cree Summer's Penny had a particular energy, a bright, confident quality that made the character feel genuinely capable and warm.
Tell me what you observed, Capman.
Well, I see a crowd looking at the fabulous Klopman diamond.
The replacement wasn't bad, but it was different. And in a show built on familiarity, that difference mattered. The animation itself also shifted. Season 2 was produced by DIC's own then-new Japanese-based facility, KKDIC Asia, rather than by TMS Entertainment. The result was a visible change in style. The fluid, polished look of Season 1 gave way to something noticeably more stiff. Characters sometimes froze into flat, static poses. Movement became more mechanical. Slow frame rates appeared with more regularity. The show began to look more like a generic 1980s animation product, and less like the distinctive series it had been.
Take your pick, my inspector.
Yes, but first, enough.
The storytelling structure also changed. Where Season 1 episodes had been self-contained, Season 2 experimented with a loose trilogy format, grouping every 3 episodes together around a shared villain or theme. The idea wasn't entirely without merit, but the execution was weak. The individual episodes felt thinner, the plots more formulaic, and the new recurring character, Corporal Cape Man, a similarly inept superhero meant to be a comic foil, was met with a decidedly mixed response from viewers. Many found him more irritating than funny. Jean Chalopin took over writing duties for Season 2, compared to Peter Sauder, who had handled Season 1. The shift in creative control contributed to the tonal inconsistency.
Even though it is a city service, it must be ticketed.
Absolutely right, oh great inspector.
The episodes of Season 2 paled noticeably when stacked against the original run, something that observers and fans recognized even at the time. By November 1985, the final episode of Season 2, Gadget and the Red Rose, had aired. No third season was ever produced. The original Inspector Gadget television series was over. Part 6, Life in Syndication and the Slow Fade. Despite the end of new production, Inspector Gadget didn't disappear. Far from it. The show ran in syndication consistently through the late 1980s and well into the 1990s. Nickelodeon aired reruns from October 1987 through August 1992, and then again from November 1996 through April 2000.
Good. Someone has to taste it to make sure it's safe.
CBS briefly slotted the show into its Saturday morning lineup from 1991 to 1992. Various other stations across North America and internationally kept the reruns going for years. For many children who grew up in the late 1980s and early 1990s, Inspector Gadget was simply always on. It was one of those shows that felt like it had always existed and always would. The reruns in syndication introduced the series to an entirely new generation who had never seen a first-run episode. DIC did return to the character once during this period, producing the Inspector Gadget Saves Christmas Special, which aired on NBC on December 4th, 1992, exactly 10 years after the original pilot.
Well, I live with my niece.
You live down the road a piece.
Don Adams, Frank Welker, and Maurice LaMarche all returned for the special. It was a reminder of what the show had been at its best: warm, silly, and genuinely fun. But it was a one-off, and it couldn't reverse the trajectory the franchise was on. Part 7, the spin-offs that struggled to fill the void. The original series may have ended, but Dick kept returning to the Inspector Gadget well throughout the following decade, with diminishing results each time. In 1995, Gadget Boy and Heather arrived, a spin-off in which the basic concept was transplanted onto a child version of the character. It shared virtually nothing with the original series beyond a loose thematic connection, and it came and went without leaving much of an impression. In 1996, Inspector Gadget's Field Trip aired, an educational series in which Gadget served as a guide through history and geography. It was aimed at a younger audience and had a distinctly different tone from the original, leaning into the educational format rather than the comedy-adventure structure that had defined the show. In 2002, Gadget and the Gadgetinis arrived, a proper sequel series co-produced by DIC and multiple European partners, including Fox Kids Europe, the French broadcaster M6, Channel 5 in the UK, and Italian studio Media Trade. The original creative team reunited. Andy Hayward, Jean Chalopin, and Bruno Bianchi all came back to work on it. Despite that pedigree, the show never aired on television in the United States, making it largely invisible to the American audience that had grown up with the original.
No mad agent could possibly gain entrance to this house.
Each episode was budgeted at approximately $400,000, a relatively modest sum for animation of the era. None of these productions managed to recapture what the original had. They existed, they aired in various markets, and they kept the name alive. But they were working in the shadow of something that had already come and gone. Part 8, the live-action film and the damage it did. If any single moment can be pointed to as the point at which the Inspector Gadget name took its most visible public hit, it was the 1999 Disney live-action film. Produced by Walt Disney Pictures and Caravan Pictures, with DIC Entertainment also involved. The studio was owned by Disney at the time. The film starred Matthew Broderick as John Brown.
Well, couldn't I say something more official, like, in the name of justice?
A security guard who becomes Inspector Gadget after being caught in an explosion. Rupert Everett played Dr. Claw, Michelle Trachtenberg played Penny, and Dabney Coleman appeared as Chief Quimby. It was directed by David Kellogg and written by Carrie Aaron and Zach Penn. The budget was between $75 and $90 million. The film grossed approximately $134.4 million worldwide, a number that on the surface sounds like success. But it lost Disney roughly $30 million once marketing and distribution costs were accounted for. More damaging than the financial performance was the critical and fan response. On Rotten Tomatoes, the film holds a 20% approval rating. The critical consensus was blunt: an abundance of visual effects, but a screenplay without wit, originality, or faithfulness to what had made the original work.
Fella will not give us a break!
For the third time! Sanford score! You are under arrest!
Fans of the cartoon were particularly frustrated by the changes made to the character. In the film, Inspector Gadget was a reasonably competent detective who actually solved his own cases. That, of course, was the exact opposite of what made him funny in the cartoon. The comedy had always come from his complete obliviousness. Removing that removed the soul of the character. Dr. Claw's face, kept carefully hidden throughout the entire original series, was fully shown in the film, something that drew particular criticism from dedicated fans of the cartoon. In the animated series, Claw's facelessness had been one of the show's most effective creative choices. You only ever saw the arm, the metal glove, the cat, his voice.
If I knew their plans in advance.
Frank Welker's deep, threatening delivery did the rest. Making him fully visible in the film stripped away one of the franchise's most distinctive elements. At the 1999 Stinkers Bad Movie Awards, the film received 5 nominations, including Worst Picture, Worst Director, and Most Painfully Unfunny Comedy. A direct-to-video sequel, Inspector Gadget 2, arrived in 2003 with French Stewart replacing Matthew Broderick in the title role. It was more faithful to the source material in certain respects. Dr. Claw's face was kept hidden again, but it went straight to home video, which said everything about where the franchise stood in terms of mainstream interest. Part 9. The rights change, hands and a reboot arrives. The ownership of Inspector Gadget passed through several hands over the years. DIC Entertainment was purchased by Cookie Jar Entertainment Company in 2008.
Is this your vehicle?
Cookie Jar was then acquired by DHX Media on October 22, 2012. DHX Media rebranded itself as Wild Brain on September 23, 2019, and that is the company that holds the rights to the Inspector Gadget library today. In 2015, a new animated Inspector Gadget series was produced by DHX Media for Netflix and the Canadian network Teletoon. It debuted globally on Boomerang in France on January 3, 2015, and premiered on Netflix in the United States on March 27, 2015. The series was updated with CGI animation and modernized storytelling, and it introduced a new villain, Dr. Claw's nephew Talon.
Your flea bag sniffed the wrong butt. Oh, and thanks, Penny. My uncle will be happy to have his claw back.
While bringing Penny and Brain into a more active, visible role alongside Gadget on his missions. The 2015 series found an audience among younger viewers and ran for 2 seasons. But for the generation that grew up with the 1983 original, it occupied a separate space in memory. The new show was competent and reasonably entertaining, but it wasn't the same thing. The hand-drawn fluidity of the original, the particular tone of Don Adams's voice, the specific texture of the early 1980s animation, those things belong to that moment in time, and no reboot can fully reproduce them. Part 10. What actually fell apart and why? Looking at the full arc of Inspector Gadget's story, the decline wasn't the result of one dramatic failure. It was a series of smaller decisions and structural pressures that eroded what had made the show special.
Prefer that you and Brain stay here where it's safe.
All right, Uncle Gadget.
The original series succeeded because of a rare combination of circumstances. The animation from TMS Entertainment gave Season 1 a visual quality above what audiences expected from syndicated television. The music by Shuki Levy was genuinely iconic. Don Adams brought an irreplaceable comedic authority to the lead role. Cree Summer gave Penny warmth and intelligence. And the writing, while formulaic by design, delivered on its formula consistently. When Season 2 came along, the replacement of the Canadian voice cast with Los Angeles-based actors removed some of that original chemistry. The shift from TMS to DIC's in-house animation facility
Wowzers! It's a burglar, Penny!
produced a noticeably different visual result. The addition of Corporal Capeman diluted the clean simplicity of the character dynamic. And the drop from 65 episodes to 21 suggested that enthusiasm for the show, at least at the production level, had already cooled. DIC's institutional habit of prioritizing volume and cost efficiency over creative consistency meant that the show was always vulnerable to the exact kind of quality drift that eventually came. The studio built its business model on producing a large amount of content quickly and cheaply. That worked when the right creative elements happened to align, as they did in Season 1. It worked less well when those elements shifted. The 1999 film then took the accumulated goodwill of the original series and spent it on a project that misunderstood the character at a fundamental level.
Wambini, I want that llama and the diamonds he spits.
A bumbling hero who is actually competent is not Inspector Gadget. He is something else wearing the costume. And then the spin-offs, each further from the source, each reaching for a different audience, each finding that the formula required specific conditions to work. Finish the process of dilution. What it meant and what remains. None of this erases what Inspector Gadget was at its peak, at its best, which is to say, during those 65 first-season episodes between 1983 and 1984. It was a genuinely inventive, funny, and well-made piece of television. It aired in over 55 countries and was broadcast in 24 different languages.
But I'm the world's greatest inspector!
Get right on it. It's a mission.
I'm always...
The theme song became, by virtually any measure, one of the most recognizable pieces of music in the history of animated television. IGN ranked it the 54th best animated television series of all time in 2009. For children who grew up watching it, it left the kind of impression that doesn't fade. The show launched the career of Cree Summer, who went on to voice characters in Rugrats, Futurama, and dozens of other productions. It established DIC Entertainment as a force in American animation. It proved that a syndicated cartoon built around a simple, repeatable premise could sustain 65 episodes without wearing out its welcome, provided the creative elements were right. What fell apart was not the idea. The idea was solid. What fell apart was the careful, somewhat accidental alignment of craft and creativity that made the original work so well. The second season, the spin-offs, and the live-action adaptation each demonstrated in their own way how difficult that alignment is to reproduce once it's gone. The original episodes are still out there. They started rerunning on MeTV Toons on June 25th, 2024. If you've never watched them as an adult, or haven't seen them in a long time, they hold up better than you might expect. There's a reason people still remember that theme song. If this walk through cartoon history brought back some memories, go ahead and give this video a like. It genuinely helps more people find content like this. And if you want to keep coming back for more deep dives into the shows, music, and pop culture moments that defined our generation, make sure you're subscribed. There's a lot more where this came from,